Hello and welcome to our webinar. Hello and welcome to our webinar on employer branding. My name's Lucy James. I'm Managing Director and co-founder at Quarsh. We are a talent consultancy and we do all sorts of things relating to recruitment and retention and everything in between. A huge part of that is around employer branding, and it's going to make a massive difference. How you approach employer branding will make a massive difference to how you recruit and retain people, certainly in 2023 and almost certainly beyond. So I'm going to start off by sharing my screen. I can. Here we are. And here is our first slide. How do we boost our employer brand? So many things to consider when we look at employer brand. As I said, it's one of the things that's going to make the biggest difference this year in terms of recruiting, and here is why. We see these sort of stats all over the place. We have a 50% reduction in cost per hire, 28% reduction in attrition, 47% increase in qualified applicants. We see this every day in the work that we do with our clients. We absolutely know that when we position our employer brand correctly, it's much easier to hire people into our business. But I wasn't clear that it was quite this much of an improvement in the various stats. So these are really encouraging things to look at when we're looking at why do we do this in the first place. So what is our employer brand? Well, quite simply, it's how your company is perceived as a place to work by your current and your future employees. There's two concepts in there. There's employer brand and employer value proposition. Employer brand is about how your future employees perceive your business. So what is it that people outside of your company right now who aren't necessarily working for you or know that much about you, what do they think about your business? How do they perceive you as a place to work? And then there's your current employees. That's your employer value proposition. These things are both true and real in your business. Whether or not you like it, you have an employer brand and an employer value proposition. What you do with it is what's important. So here we have your employer brand and your employer value proposition, your EB and your EVP, perception and experience. Perception being those people on the outside who are looking in, what do you like as a place to work, and your employer value proposition, those people who are in your business, who live and breathe your business every day. The two are very much intertwined. At some point, someone's going to come from outside the business and work for you, we hope, and that creates your employer value proposition. And those two things are connected together in a really fundamental way. How people perceive your business affects how they then interview with your business, how they settle into your business, and then how they behave in your business once you're there. So employer brand through employer value proposition. So where is your employer brand? It's pretty much everywhere, really. It's everywhere that you touch the lives of a future colleague. So on your own LinkedIn page, it's on your careers page if you have one. It's on your advertising as well, how you choose to position the roles that you have available. It's on Twitter, it's on good old Glassdoor, it's on Instagram, it's on Pinterest, it's on Facebook. It's everywhere that you have a brand. Also, one of the things that's making a big difference at the moment is ESG. So it's also on your careers page in terms of how you position how your business is behaving as far as global concerns are related. So how do people assess your employer brand and EVP, and why does it matter? Two areas of this. One is your employer brand, and they assess it in the following ways. All of our online and offline channels, every interaction that they have with your business from the outside is impacted by their perception of your employer brand. So it's everywhere, from the first time they see an advert about your business through to when they apply for a role and how that process works, through to when they first come in for interview, when they're invited for interview and how the experience is with the interviewer, through to when they're offered a job and do they accept it, and so on and so on and so on. And all the way through this process, people are making decisions about whether they apply and also how hard they work during interview. So imagine this: somebody comes in for somebody applies for a role that they see online. They expect you to be a funky kind of organisation, and they get to your business and everybody's wearing suits with bobs and waistcoats and all that sort of stuff, and they've turned up in business casual. Immediately there's an element of dissonance, an element of uncertainty about what's going on, and so that creates worry, that creates nervousness, that creates a chink in their perception of you as a business and what they're expecting when they join you. And so in the interview, when you roll that through to interview, they're not entirely sure about what stories to share, about how to behave, about what they're going to be discussing. They're less comfortable than they would be if that whole process was a lot smoother and they were expecting and they got what they expected all the way through. So it makes a huge difference. It also affects how a manager interviews, because if you've got a really great candidate who loves what you do, and who gets what you do and is keen to join your business, they're going to perform better at interview, which makes the life of the manager much easier too. They can have a much more productive interview, a much more interesting interview. They'll come away from it with a much clearer idea of what that candidate is about. And so that rolls through onto your EVP, your employer value proposition. It affects how people talk about your business, how your colleagues, your employees, your people will discuss what they're doing, how they're doing it, what's important to them, what's important to your business with people that they know in networking forums, in real life even. And that in itself affects your culture. It affects how people behave, how they treat each other, how they treat their suppliers, how they treat their clients, how they treat future clients, how they talk about you out and about. This in itself then affects retention, how long somebody stays with you, and also how hard they work as well. So the productivity when they're with you, how long they choose to stay, and how much of themselves they give during that time. And what's important about all of this is that you behave in all regards with authenticity and integrity. And that is a really key concept for employer brand. Who are you? What do you stand for? What does your business stand for? How do you communicate that? And how do you then discuss that on an open forum? Authenticity and integrity are absolutely crucial. And it's fine if you want to keep your current employer brand. There's nothing wrong with your employer brand. You have one. Same with your employer value proposition, but you need to be aware of what it is and be true to yourself. Understand how it impacts your people around you. We know, for example, that people stay when they're paid well, when they're mentored, challenged, promoted, involved, appreciated, all of these different things. And that in itself runs through our employer value proposition, our employer brand all the time. These are the things that affect whether people stay with you. If we can reflect what our people feel and believe about our business out there in the outside world, that is what your employer brand is all about. ESG is such an important thing that it deserves a slide in and of itself. So ESG, environmental and social governance, the new term for CSR, not so new anymore. And we know from research for ages now that people are making decisions about who they choose to go and work for and things that they buy based on that corporation's, that company's ESG commitments, how that company is behaving as far as our world is concerned. Particularly true now with Gen Z and next Gen Alpha coming through the ranks. It makes a massive difference. So how do we present our employer brand? What do we do next? What's next? First thing is to have a really clear understanding about what our values are. And these might be values that trickle down from the board. They might be ones that are imposed upon you, or they might be even better ones that bubble up from within the business. Either way, they need to be understood, they need to be clear, they need to be clarified, they need to be communicated to the business and on your website, and a careers page, and on your socials, and. So all of those various touch points that a future employee will find. That's where they need to be. We need to match our tone to our company style as well. So if we're again a young and funky kind of organisation, let's talk in a young and funky kind of way. There is no point using corporate language if that's just not the language that we use inside our business, because those chinks appear, that dissonance appears through that application process, through that recruiting process, and people don't really feel safe. They don't understand what they're there to do. If you can, find and use video content of people that you currently have in your organisation. So by that, what I mean is your colleagues who you know live and breathe your values in a really fundamental way. You know that John or Frida or Julie are really great exponents of X value in your business. They live and breathe that really well. Let's video them. Let's take some content of them. Let's share it out there on the web. That can be an extremely powerful way of helping people outside the business understand how your business feels and behaves internally. Really powerful if you can. When you're advertising roles, think of recruiting much closer to sales and marketing than HR. That will really help with this aspect of it. So when we're advertising roles, I see over and over again really boring job ads that are just regurgitations of a job description, bullet points, internal TLAs that mean absolutely nothing to people outside the business, and frankly go into way too much detail about what it is that person's going to be doing. Instead, let's have a think about what is it that would make your ideal future colleague stop what they're doing, a job that they could be enjoying perfectly well, and apply for yours, and then come and interview with you, and then accept the role. What is it that you can offer that is special, that is great, that will add to somebody's life? So often adverts are about us, are about we are a business that does this, we've been around for this long. It's so much less interesting than thinking about things from a candidate's point of view. What is it that you can do for them that's going to engage them? As I said, recruitment is much closer to sales and marketing than it is to HR. People rarely go into HR to do recruiting, and I would argue the same the other way around as well. People rarely go into recruiting to do HR. So if you can think of recruiting as much closer to sales and marketing, talk to your marketing department about how to communicate in a way that affects that your future colleagues will want to see. And if you're not clear on that, take some of those current colleagues who are fantastic ambassadors for your brand and ask them, does this advertising work for you? Where would you look if you were looking for a new role? Use that as a starting point. And most importantly, as already said, be authentic throughout your entire employer brand process. Make sure that you're authentic with it. Okay, so how does that look? Here's an example of one of our clients, Enso Energy. Have gone to huge efforts to look at how do they present themselves as an employer. It's lovely, it's clean, it's crisp, it's clear, it makes sense. We start out here in the example that I'm going to show you with a description of what they are about. So these are real people and they're doing real things, and they're talking about climate change as it is important to them. Absolutely clear on what their mission is in life. Then they talk about their values. So these values in themselves aren't necessarily groundbreaking, but the description of them has been really carefully created to make sure that the business not only understands what it's there to do. So this is throughout the entire business, but we can also communicate that well to people who don't work at Enso currently. And what that means is that during the recruitment process, managers can be very clear as well on how they're going to position questions, what they're going to ask about, how they're going to do that, which then makes it easier to manage for values afterwards. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And then we have a picture of a good old Kirsty. What is it that she likes about the business? How long has she been there for? What does she enjoy? And so on and so on. And that gives people a really good sense of what they can expect from the business too. And then finally, a little call to action. This is on their careers page. Come and join us, start doing work that matters. Very clear, very clean, very crisp. Wouldn't necessarily work for your business. Think about how it's going to work for you in a way that would make sense. So what does this all mean? How do we tie this together? What I've done here is I've created two sections that you can start looking at. One for EVP, one for employer brand, the basics you need to get right straight away. And then once you've done those, once you've tackled those, how can we elevate it? How can we make it even better? So let's start with your employer value proposition and the essentials you need to put in place for that. Let's start with understanding your EVP. Do this with a survey if you can. Find out what motivates your people, what they truly believe, how they feel in your business. What is it that makes your business fantastic compared to everywhere else they've worked and everywhere else they'd consider working too? Understand that. Get some clarity around that. Make sure those values resonate across the whole business, that you haven't got pockets of the business that frankly don't get it or care or are that bothered about it. And the more we can socialize our values, the more we can talk about our values, the better we're able to start really pushing that as well in terms of recruitment and retention and managing and change and so on. And then we showcase our company direction too. So where are we going? How do we communicate that internally? How do we give people a sense of pride that the business that they're with is one that they're going to really succeed with and do better with than if they go anywhere else? These things in themselves will make a big difference to how your business is perceived internally. Employer brand. We have our careers page, of course, the very first place to go. What is it that's great about your business? How are you going to position your company as an employer of choice to people who don't know you already? We are not all Google. Not everyone knows that we even exist, let alone what we do. Are our social channels up to date? Are we sharing content that's interesting, that's useful, that talks about where the company is going, about current colleagues who are in the business at the moment and what they enjoy? Can we encourage our team to share content on channels like LinkedIn as well? Makes a huge difference to the quality of colleagues that those people will have in the future. So I found that an excellent lever for people that I talk to about these things is if you do better on LinkedIn, you'll have better colleagues, which will make your life easier. That can often be a good one to try and pull. Advertising, talked about already. How do we position our business in a way that is appealing to our target market? Not everybody. You don't want more applicants. If anything, you want fewer applicants who are more appropriate for the role that you have. There is nothing better than talking to a candidate who says, I loved what you said in that advert. It really resonated with me. I love what I then went off to go and have a look at your business and what you do. I've never heard about you before, but you sound like just the sort of business I would thrive in. You get such a fantastic interview that way. You find out a huge amount about the individual that's much more personal than if they're just going for another interview with another company. So get your advertising right. Equally, work on your candidate experience, so that every part of that touch process, think about every part of the process that you have some kind of exchange with your candidates. Think about every single part of that and make every single one of them as smooth as it can possibly be and as authentic and true to your values that you can possibly make it. Give them a clue as to what would be suitable business attire to wear in your company, for example, or what subjects you might be covering during interview if it's a particularly junior role and they're not sure about what's going to be going on. Anything you can do to make that candidate experience as good as it can possibly be will stand you in great stead. And again, showcase company direction on your careers page, on your company page, wherever it is that you think is most relevant and most suitable, as visible as possible. Where are you going? How are you going to get there? How is this individual? How is the person that you're talking to people through the internet? How can they contribute to your future success? Okay, so now we've got the essentials covered, the basics covered. Let's go up a level. Let's think about how do we tackle some of the meatier issues, some of the more complex issues in employee value proposition. This is a really tricky one. Make sure your values underpin how you manage and develop your people. It's so easy to come up with 5 values. It's less easy to socialize those values, make it really clear what those values mean, ensure your managers are managing against those values, and that people's development paths are tied to those values, behaviours, competencies, and so on. It is really important to do that in a way that is logical and makes sense, and again is full of authenticity and integrity. And the reason why it's useful and important is that it helps you when it comes to, yes, developing people, but also exiting people who don't quite fit, who aren't quite right for your business, who are doing the job technically, but causing an awful lot of disruption. And we all have those at some point in our business. If our values are really clear, it's much easier to move people, to help people thrive elsewhere, shall we say. And we make culture central to everything we do. So is this way of dealing with client X in line with our values? Is this way of managing colleague Y in line with our values? When we carry out our recruiting process, what do our values say and how do we embed those in the questions that we ask and the experience that we give and so on? Culture central to everything you do. You can do that most effectively with something like a culture club, a culture team that's responsible for, which we in our business, we tend to rotate this so different people are involved at different times. And it gives everybody a sense of belonging as to the culture of the business. It applies to companies both big and small. And we have a focus on ESG as well, our environmental, social and governance. It's increasingly important to people. Let's make sure that we're thinking about it. How is it resonating with the people that we employ? Not always the case that the people that we employ hold themselves up to the same high standards as they expect us as business owners to do. That notwithstanding, key differentiator will certainly make a difference as we start to bring more Gen Zs and Alphas through our companies. Okay, so employer brand, the advanced level for employer brand. How do we make this work in the best possible way? Let's start out with that fabulous piece of identifying and showcasing our brand champions. It tackles so many issues, this one. When you first approach somebody and talk to them about, would you be our brand champion? We think you live and breathe our values in a really fantastic way. Oh, really? Oh, fantastic. Well, I love being here because clearly they will. They are your brand champion. They're the people who represent you really well. So they'll be super pleased, first of all, to have been recognised in that regard. And then you can start championing them elsewhere as well. We've chosen Josie to be our brand champion for this particular value. Really proud of her. Thank you, Josie. And then people start to watch each other's behaviour and performance and start to emulate that themselves as well. So it gives everybody a little sense of both in a clear visual way, this is what this is what is expected of me. And for the individuals who are selected, what a wonderful way of keeping them engaged too. And these are the people we really want to keep. And we align recruitment to our values too. So we use the QBC framework for recruiting, qualifiers, behaviours and competencies. The behaviours piece is tricky. It's far less easy to assess for than qualifiers. Qualifiers, you can do it or you can't, simple. Behaviours is much more difficult, and it's hard to ask questions that are specifically geared towards behaviours. Some argue that you can't ask those questions at all. So instead, what we're looking for is stories, really, examples of how someone has behaved in XYZ situation, what they would do in XYZ, what they would do differently, and so on and so on. And if we can include our values in those discussions, if we can look for clues as to how our values are represented in the stories that our candidates share, again, it makes it much easier to say, this is someone who's going to fit really well into our business, and this is someone who's not going to fit so well into our business. This is what we can work on, this is what we can't. makes a huge difference. And then it runs through to how we manage them as well, which makes a big difference. Candidate packs, I can't emphasize this enough, really. If we send out job descriptions that are bullet points and TLAs that really only matter to us and are only meaningful to us, we're missing a huge trick. Over the last 12 years or so since we set Quarsh up, repeatedly we have heard that the quality of candidate packs that we send out make a difference as to the level of engagement of candidates in an interview process. And that applies at every level, from entry level straight out of university right through to the board. Include as much content as you can that isn't sensitive, that isn't company sensitive, because you don't know where that candidate pack is going to go. The more they know at that stage, the more effort you put in at that stage, the more seriously your future colleagues will know that you take recruiting, and so they will behave seriously as well. It makes a massive difference, and it can sometimes be the difference between somebody accepting a role with you or one of your competitors, and it can absolutely be the difference between somebody accepting a role with you for the salary that you offer and negotiating for a much, much higher amount, because frankly, why shouldn't they? They're not that bothered about joining you. Make an effort through the interview process, make an effort at the candidate engagement stage will make a huge difference to your success rate in hiring people. And then finally, making career paths visible and clear and really obvious. So again, on your website, on your careers page, internally as well within your organisation, show career development, show how it aligns to behaviours and values and how people interact with each other, their suppliers, their future clients, and so on and so on. Make those career paths visible so that anybody can see, if I join your business, this is where I'm expecting to go. So thank you very much. This was the stage in the webinar where we look for questions, and so I shall sign off by saying thank you very much. If you have any questions, do please give me a shout. My contact details should be here along the bottom of the screen, yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much.